I'm Sophie and I love books.
I'm Rudi and I love movies, and this is It Was a Book First, the podcast about new book-to-screen adaptations. Today, we're really excited to be joined by Oscar-nominated screenwriter Samy Burch to discuss her new film, Late Fame, director Kent Jones's adaptation of the 1985 novella by Austrian author Arthur Schnitzler, starring Willem Dafoe, Greta and Edmund Donovan.
If you're new here, Rudi and I are culture reporters with bylines at places like Esquire and the Washington Post. And on this podcast, we discuss the page-to-screen adaptations that everyone is talking about.
For Late Fame, Sophie read the novella, we both watched the film, and since this is a small, independent movie that is getting a limited theatrical release before it heads to streaming, we're going to try our best to avoid spoiling the movie too much before we get into our conversation with Samy Burch. So to start, Sophie, you want to talk about the kind of long, winding, and very meta history of this novella?
This is a really cool one. So I will hold up the book for anyone who watching. This is a very slim novella. I think it's just exactly 100 pages. And so this was originally written at the end of the 1800s. It is originally in German, and it was completely unpublished. So when Arthur Schnitzler, it's a really fun name, by the way.
It is.
When Arthur Schnitzler's estate was sort of under threat during Nazi occupation of Vienna. Yes, the Nazis are here in this story.
Okay.
So during Nazi occupation of Vienna in the 1930s, there was concern about his estate. And so the British government got involved and they sort of sealed off his estate to say that the Nazis couldn't burn everything. And then they came in and brought it back to England, like in, I think they said 8 boxes of his stuff. And this basically, they started to, I think it was his wife and son, or maybe ex-wife and son, but they started to release some of his unpublished works. He had already passed at this time. And this was one that just didn't get published. And
Literally
so this
sat
basically
on the shelf, right?
sat in a box somewhere until eventually it was published by New York Review of Books, which is an independent press, in 2017. And so this is a really interesting story, which is the book, the novella itself is about a poet finding fame late in his life. And this is a book, now movie, that is finding fame late in its life. I will say that Arthur Schnitzler himself had fame when he himself was alive. So it's not, a direct one-to-one in that way, but it is a super meta story. And honestly, I kind of want now like the movie version of this guy's life and all the stuff being taken out of Nazi occupied Austria. So yeah, there's a really, really interesting backstory on this one. And I love that it's sort of now getting like even another life as a movie. Rudi, do you want to talk a little bit about the plot?
Yeah. So this is a film that stars Willem Dafoe as a poet named Ed Saxberger, who for the last 40 or 50 years, has just been working as a postal worker. Yeah. He published a book of poetry called Way Past Go in the 70s. He's kind of a forgotten poet. And one day he's walking home and a young man shows up at his door, a young man who refers to himself as Myers, shows up at his door and says, "Are you the poet, Ed Saxberger?" And he says, "Sure, yeah, I am." Well, you know who I am? And he has discovered this work. He goes into a very intricate explanation of how he found this book and basically hails it as a lost classic. And says that him and his group of poetry friends are great admirers of
the Enthusiasm Society.
Yes, the Enthusiasm Society, as we learn, are great admirers of Ed's work. And Ed is kind of befuddled. He doesn't really know what's going on. They end up running into each other later on, and Myers insists that Ed accompany him to meet his group of friends. And what kind of transpires from there is that Ed, who is then referred to as Saxberger, because everyone in the Enthusiast Society refers to themselves and others by their last names, basically becomes intoxicated by these 20-somethings who treat him as this kind
god.
of, yeah, really this
As what they
incredible
are
poet.
trying to become, and someone, this
Exactly.
luminary, they really connect him. Were you like in the beat poetry scene
Yes.
in Soho?
Yes.
Did you know these people? And he's,
Yes.
related to that group, but not in some real way. And this novella at the time was really a commentary on this young Austrian Vienna art world. And this movie now is really commentary on
The
rich,
literati.
trust fund NYU kids. I mean,
Yes.
we will talk to Sammy about this, but there is so much NYU slander in this. And
Yes.
I should say, Rudi, I saw this at a screening with other, writers and critics and things like that. And the making fun of the literati NYU crowd got loud laughs in
Yeah.
the room throughout. We
Well,
were
I mean,
really the target audience for this movie.
and the character of Myers and his compatriots, they all speak in a very old fashioned kind of way, quite an affectation.
It's
They
almost like a
present, yeah,
transcontinental
and
accent.
it's something that Saxberger, who's very like blue collar,
Mhm.
comments on and is sort of shocked by, and he's kind of befuddled the entire time. And I
Mhm.
think Willem Dafoe is one of my favorite actors. There was a year, I think 2023, where he was my most seen actor in any
I love that
all
you
the
know
movies that I
that.
watched. He just showed up so much. Letterbox stats, you can kind of see
Oh, nice. Okay.
who appears the most. But he is, I like him the most when he's kind of a character actor supporting role as like a kind of little
Okay.
freak. Like he is someone who looks like like he played the Green
No,
Goblin and he looks like a
yeah.
goblin, and that's
Yeah.
one of his superpowers and what makes him such a
Does that mean you
compelling
did not
figure.
like this
No, I think this
character?
was interesting to see him playing this more downcast, kind of delicate role that, I haven't seen the Florida Project, but I think my
Oh
understanding
my
is that he's a
God.
bit more like that in the Florida Project than he is in
Yes.
this film. Have you seen that before?
Yeah, Rudi, I don't know how you haven't seen that
I
one.
know
That
it's on
movie
my list.
I can't imagine watching it again, but oh my God, it's so good. I think that he is so
Yeah.
good in this role and so perfect for the character. I'm gonna admit something. I didn't read the book first. And that was just a timing issue for me about when my copy arrived. And it does really change the experience of some of
Yeah.
my other, viewing things, but I can't express how much he embodies this character for a modern age. And I found his performance, I think, the strongest part of the
Oh, yeah,
movie.
absolutely. I mean, he's such an incredible actor and he has so much range as well,
His
as you can see with
face.
this role. Yes, his face, if you've ever seen him in Robert Eggers' films, which he's in most of them, he'll be in
Mhm.
Werewolf later this year. He is such a weirdo in all of those movies, and
Yeah.
especially The Lighthouse, which is
Oh my
you've never
God,
seen that,
so
him and Robert
bizarre.
Pattinson. He's incredible in
Fun
that.
at the lighthouse.
And this is interesting to see him playing such a downcast, kind of quiet
It's a
role,
very
and
quiet character.
it contrasts really well with the Myers character portrayed by Edmund Donovan, who is incredible in
I'm
this.
obsessed. It
What
was
a find!
First of all, this guy couldn't be more perfect. Whoever did the costumes on this and the
Yeah.
styling of that character and his apartment and him as this trust fund kid in these all white outfits.
Yes.
Oh my
Yes.
God, it was
So without spoiling
delectable.
too much, this is revealed pretty early. He presents as kind of a struggling artist, but
Rudi, I could have
really
told
he
you he
is
was a
not.
trust fund kid like 1 minute into meeting him. That wasn't like a reveal. But this movie is what I would call more of a vibes movie than a
Yes.
plot movie.
Yes.
It really, you are very in Saxberger's head throughout,
Yes.
which is also what the experience of reading the novella is. But I will say that I found Defoe brought more sympathy and more care to that character than I necessarily found the version of him in the book. And I think that's a lot because of the performance.
It's interesting that you say that the book within the novella is called Wandering, and
Yes.
because this is very much a kind of wandering style New York indie. This is a very
Yes.
particular type of film that I've certainly seen before. I'm sure you've seen this
Yeah.
type of film before, but I think there's something new here. There is something very compelling about this story. And we'll talk to Sammy about this, but her writing is so sharp. And if you don't know Sammy
So
Burch,
sharp.
she wrote May December, which is a
Hmm.
movie that, I think Sophie, you and I
Are you?
both really
I
love.
loved that
Yeah,
movie. Charles Melton not getting the nomination for that performance is one of
yeah.
mine that like I will just bring up at a dinner party because I'm still mad at it.
And I think the thing about that film is like I knew right away that was on my wavelength when we have that sort of opening scene that involves Julianne Moore's character opening the fridge and says, "I think we need more hot dogs."
Yep.
And that I was like, okay,
It's like
this is
for
my vibe.
us. Yeah.
And she's clearly a very sharp writer who can be very funny, but
This movie is
also
so
very deep,
funny.
and there's a lot of sadness within this film.
Oh,
And
this is a
yeah.
deeply melancholy
And
movie
this
in
film
general.
also stars Greta Lee in a very big performance. So Greta Lee is this character Gloria, who is an actress who hangs around with the Enthusiasm Society and is also a character who is not exactly what she seems at
Hmm.
first. She's incredibly big. She's wearing a wig that
Uh,
I
uh,
could not stop looking at when she first
the
appears on
wig is
screen.
really distracting.
It's its own character, really.
Yeah, the wig is distracting. I will say, that character really bothered me in the
Mm,
movie. It felt just really one dimensional, a lot of it. And then I read the book, and I should say that the book and the film are very closely mirrored in terms of scene to scene. And what I think is so successful about the adaptation is how they did that while making it really modern and taking
sure,
it to a new
sure.
country and a new, a decade plus. I mean, sorry,
More than, yeah, a century plus.
a century plus for really successfully. The character is even thinner in the
Mm,
book. They actually
mm.
add some stuff that I'm going to wait till we talk to Sammy
Okay.
about, that I think I'm really glad they added because I would
Hmm.
have felt even more like this had that not been there. So I found it to be even more interesting once I read the book and realized that it's really sort of directly from that.
Sure, sure. And this film is really about, Saxberger, the Willem Dafoe character, trying to consider whether he's the entire time he's trying to write a poem
Hmm.
and he's struggling with writing that poem. He takes a meeting with a agent
Oh
about
my, played by Jake
Jake
Lacey.
Lacey in an incredible
I
cameo.
wrote down a note and I was like, the casting of Jake
Yeah.
Lacey to be the evil publishing agent is
And Jake Lacey was
perfection.
in director Kent Jones's last film, Diane, so not surprising
Oh,
that he would appear here as well.
that was, so good.
Yeah, and you watch Willem Dafoe's character kind of pull away from his group of friends who are much more
Blue
like
collar.
stereotypical blue collar, hang out at the pool hall, drink beers
Hmm.
kind of guys, and you see his what he wears change, and he starts embracing
He has a
this kind
scarf.
of
He puts a scarf on.
yeah, he starts embracing this position as this beloved figure, and it's kind of a tragic story in a lot of ways. It's also a funny film, and I really recommend that when this comes out, people check this out. When you're listening to this, I believe this will be out in limited release in New York and then out in LA the next weekend with other cities to follow. It's a Magnolia film, so it should be also on streaming within a few
I
weeks or
think too,
so.
this is
But
a great streaming movie.
yes, I
I
did watch
think,
it at home on a screener and,
yeah,
and
I
found it
think
to be fine. I would have liked to have seen it in a theater, but I was okay watching
this
it at
is a
home.
really good streaming. I'll say too, I think it's around 90 minutes. Like,
Yes,
this is a
yes,
type of New York movie where like New York is the main character and it's not too
absolutely.
long and I'm in it, that as a New Yorker, I love. So I really enjoyed this. I thought it was a fun
Yeah,
watch.
yeah. Now, Sophie, we will do a brief Sophie's choice, since
Yeah.
you did read both, and this was the other way around. So, as usual, this is our segment that is based on a movie that is based on a book. Sophie, which did you prefer? Was it watching the film or reading the novella?
So I actually did enjoy watching the film more for this
Mm,
one, and it's for a really specific reason, which is the humor. So I
sure.
think that the humor in Late Fame, the novella, probably hit so good if you were in Vienna in like 1895. You were like, oh my God, sick burns, people catching strays. I love this. And I got to have that experience towards like Trust Fund NYU
Yeah.
Kids at Gallatin because Sammy updated the humor for my sensibilities. And the movie was extremely targeted to me as a person who grew up here and knows a lot of these people and works in, and around publishing. So
Yeah.
yeah, the movie was really targeted to me in a way that I don't think Schnitzler was
I
necessarily doing.
I got the sense that this was probably a funnier and more satirical take on this story than
You
the
know,
novella was.
I honestly think though, like, yes, because we are just sort of like a little funny, more out
Uh-huh.
there now. But I think that this is full of a lot of
Oh, cool.
satire and dragging. It's really intentionally meant to be like dragging the literati of Vienna in the 1890s. I'm serious. Like, honestly, I'm sure you can find it online. Like there's some good description, like some notes in
Sure,
the
sure.
novella about the history of it. And yeah, it was really meant to be cultural commentary in the same way as it is updated for the movie.
Cool. Well, now we're going to go to our conversation with Samy Burch, the writer of Late Fame. Today, we are joined by Samy Burch, the Oscar nominated screenwriter of May December, who has a new movie called Late Fame that's in select theaters now. Sammy, thank you so much for joining us. We're both really big fans of May December, and
Oh,
we really
thank you.
enjoyed Late Fame. And I know you had never done an adaptation like this before, right? So, what made you
That's
want to
true.
both adapt this novella and really like tackle an adaptation?
Yeah, I mean, I think the novella came first, where my sister's fiance recommended it to me. It was like the summer of 2021. I figured
Okay.
out, and he was just like, "I read this book. I think you'd love," and I did, and I think partially because it was in the public domain, or we thought at the time it was, that got a little complicated, but
Yeah.
it's written in 1895. It felt like kind of um that's a sort of a freeing adaptation to tackle, because you're not like trying to buy something
Mm-hmm.
or tackle down who owns it. um I don't know how granular you guys want to get in the process of rights to
Oh,
things, but
we
it was
love it
kind of
all.
interesting, just because different countries have different laws, and there's a
Yeah.
lot of
Oh.
different countries involved in this, because he's Austrian.
Mhm.
Right.
The initial publisher is German. Their laws are very specific. It was found in the UK later. It was a whole situation. We had a German
So
attorney. It was kind of
are you
exciting.
like
Oh
doing
my
all of
God.
that before you're even thinking about writing the
Way
script? Or
later.
you wrote the
Way
script and then you
later.
were like, crap, now I got to figure
Oh
out how
my
to get the
God.
rights of
It was
this?
fine. It was actually fine, and a lot of credit goes to Pam Koffler at Killer Films, the producer, who honestly was so fun. Every time I got on the phone with her about it, it felt like a PBS special about rights. Like, she was so into it. But it was a surprise, because something in 1895, that's well in the public domain. If it were
Yeah.
an American piece of literature, if it wasn't, if there was no other kind of interesting journey that this took. But at the time, yeah, I was like, perfect. I'm just gonna do this on my own. I'm gonna write it as a spec. And it was an interesting challenge. Both, yeah, because I hadn't ever attempted an adaptation of a novel. And also because it's a very simple one, and
Mm-hmm.
that's what I like about it. It's really simple, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just, I wanted to try and capture what it feels like to read it, which is, there's
Mm.
like a kind of a biting humor, and
Mm-hmm.
it's very uncomfortable. And I felt like um, the plot, the only real plot kind of to speak of, is more in charting out how Ed feels about himself.
Yes.
How is Ed insecure right now? How's Ed's ego? How is, the nuances of just how he's feeling about himself as a writer and as a man. That was interesting to me. So that was, and it, right off the bat, it felt very natural to modernize. And New York is a city I know, and certainly a city where a lot of at any given moment there are men in coffee shops talking about their writing. So in that way, it was very natural.
I'm curious if you had Willem Dafoe in mind for the role as you were writing. It feels like really perfect casting, having just read the novella. Did you have him in mind?
It was the most kismet thing. I didn't initially, because I wasn't really thinking in those terms. And also, I think at first the age was a little bit older, where the New York was more the 60s versus the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
That was just sort of where I started. I don't know if this is, I don't know. I think it's a fun story. Basically, when Kent first got involved, which was so exciting, he and Pam Koffler and Willem were all on the same flight back to New York, because it was like the PWGA Awards or something. It was something in that time. They were all on the same plane, and we had known that Willem's manager had been calling Pam, and Kent, and then Pam watches, and Kent goes, and Willem and him are sitting in the same two chairs, and they'd kind of met over New York Film Festival, so they talked this whole flight.
Oh, I love it.
And then this is how I'm this is hearsay, but this is exactly how I heard the story. Then Willem calls his manager and says, who I just had an amazing conversation with for 5 hours is Kent Jones. I'd really love to work with him. And the manager goes, well, he has a movie that I think you're perfect for. It's an adaptation of the Schnitzler novella called Late Fame. And Willem had that in his bag.
No,
he had
way.
the book on the plane in his bag. He'd been carrying it around. So it was like this kind of almost like stunning act of fate.
I love that.
That was it was really lucky. And then when, of course, Willem came, he brings not only this sort of different era, because he came to New York in the 70s, but he actually did come to New York in the 70s.
Right,
so he brought all the specificity of the world of Soho, of this amazing time with the Wooster Group and everything that he came into, and is such a beautiful collaborator. And Kent as well. I think he might have gotten to New York in the 80s or like a little early 80s. But so he also has, this kind of texture. I got to New York a bit later than that, but it seemed a little more romantic. But
Willem also seems like the kind of guy who might have had a little bit of success early in his career and then could have just disappeared into a normal job, just that kind of obviously that didn't happen, but he does seem like the kind of person who could have done that,
Well, there's something about him and his spirit that is both extremely ethereal and also so grounded, such a, I don't want to say normal person, but, just a really kind and like somebody that of course you could see being like, I don't want to get caught up in all this movie star stuff. And he has done a great job of not doing that.
Yeah, well, he chooses really interesting roles like this people, one, which is also one that, Sophie, it's funny that you say, oh, I think he's perfect casting for this. When I watched the movie, I was like, oh, this is not the Willem Dafoe I'm used to seeing. This is range. This is a more delicate performance, more downcast performance than, the kind of weirdos that he often plays.
I agree. I think it's really around how expressive his face is. I mean, Sammy, as you know, the novella is so interior to Saxberger's mind at any
Yeah.
time. And I think I was really struck by my different feelings for the character in the book when I had to hear all the thoughts versus just see them sometimes on Willem Dafoe's very expressive face. And I just felt so in it with him in a way that really brought that character to life for me.
That's great. Yeah, I really, I mean, he's just amazing. Just the most, I mean, some of, like, one of my favorite scenes is like him going through his old papers.
Yeah.
There's not any words, and you know, it's just, you just feel, it's just a feeling, and it's all on his expression.
Well, and then on like kind of the almost opposite end of the spectrum, you have Greta Lee, whose performance is so big in this. She is larger than life. I feel like everyone kind of knows a Gloria.
Yes.
She's also a
in New
tragic,
York for sure.
but she's also this kind of tragic figure.
Absolutely.
Did you? I mean, obviously, you're basing her off the character in the novella, but did you also base her off anybody that like you know in real life?
You know, there were people there, and there's more of Gloria, I think, in the movie than the book. There are a couple of scenes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, there's a woman. I lived in New York in an apartment that there were two apartments on, like, it was a big walk up, and there were two apartments. And one was this kind of theatrical woman that I suspected was, I think we knew, or we suspected was like a dominatrix by trade. And she kind of lived with this man that was older, and you're kind of like, what is this? But because there were only two apartments, it was like intimate. And we would also always find pieces of paper, like scrap paper, that would just had the address that I'm assuming men were like dropping because they're like, I'm here. Do you know what I mean? So that's not necessarily that relevant to you know, I think Greta Lee would be shocked to hear that, but things like people like that you meet in New York that are, you know, that there's kind of a glamour to, but then there's a grit of what's going on here.
It's like a protective shell that's incredibly shellacked, you know, that they put around themselves. And I think, you know, I was struck. So we've been doing this podcast now for a few months. It's been really fun to read so many adaptive works. And, you know, some of them are taking a piece of writing as a kernel of an idea and doing whatever. This one is much more true, like beat to beat of the novella. And I would love to hear a little bit about that. And because to me, one of the biggest scenes that you do add, and I'll speak about it in vague terms so we don't spoil it for people, but is the extra scene with the Greta Lee character at her apartment. I think like when I was reading the novella, I was a little like, oh, like that one isn't in there. I'm curious about, you know, sort of what you chose to keep more true, which is a lot of it, and where you did decide to take those liberties and add something really net new.
Yeah, I mean, I had a very simple approach, which was I read a Traum novelle or Dream Story. That's the Arthur Schnitzler novella that became Eyes Wide Shut, which is a movie I love. I rewatched Eyes Wide Shut. I don't know if you've done this one for the podcast. That would be a fun one, because similarly, you're going to find.
Didn't even know it was based on a book, honestly.
Oh yeah, it's another like 1890s Vienna based story that is extremely close as well. I mean, there are lines that I was shocked to find in the novella of, you know, that are like these sort of Nicole Kidman trailer line. You know, you go, oh wow, he nailed it right back all the way over there. So that kind of gave me a freedom to go, okay, I'm going to respect one of the great writers that we've ever, you know, that have been on the earth, and keep what I like, try and capture it. And if anything, if I just feel the instinct to add or subtract, or, you know, even just, you know, those little things, I just felt the freedom to not one way or the other feel like I had to stay so entirely purist, or that I had to throw this out the window and go, oh, this is just a concept, you know, because I think that while I think it is a great concept of just, you know, this discovery, I love the detail. I do. I love the like him giving a speech at the table, and it's just like you can just feel they're like not impressed anymore, and it's so uncomfortable. You know, that scene in the book, I thought, you know, gave me such, or him in the bar with his friends.
Oh, it's like cringe. Like
It's exactly that's what I love.
Well,
absolutely.
Speaking of cringe, I think my favorite character in the film, because I think of how you chose to write him and because of Edmund Donovan's performance, is Myers.
Obsessed. We're obsessed with him.
It must have been, I mean, he's such
amazing.
a find for one, but it must have been so fun to write him and the Enthusiasm Society because they're so ridiculous and they say ridiculous things. I mean,
is this based on your time at NYU?
You know, there are certainly boys that I think about 4 boys that I thought of, not necessarily anything they said, and those, thankfully, none of those boys ever met each other. They were always alone in my experience. But there were details of, you know, pea coats and tiny little writing, you know, like things of just that you kind of see over the years that definitely were influential. But no, I mean, in some way, I feel like, my time at NYU, there were certainly groups form, you know, egos are at an all-time high. Like I recognize that. But then this is even, you know, this is like a super group, I think, of almost how these kids found each other. But no, Edmund is really amazing, and nothing like this character in real life, which is I think even more impressive.
Cool.
And
so most of that on the page then? I mean, is that like, I assume you wrote him that way to speak in that kind of antiquated, you know.
And what was really fun with his, a little bit with Gloria got to, but him in particular, there are some direct lines that were written in 1895 that just felt so natural to me, coming out of a character like this's mouth. So anytime I had an opportunity to do that, I really loved doing that. So yes, it's there, but also I think Edmund is just such a skilled, you know, he comes from theater. And that's the other thing is all these boys, some of them, this is their first part. The young one was been on Broadway. I think they literally are all like Yale, Carnegie Mellon, Juilliard. I mean,
so they are the kind of
profession.
They're fresh out. And it was so fun. And I, you know, obviously want to mention Laura Rosenthal, who was was the casting director, who also cast May December, and is just like the coolest New York casting director, and you know, knows where to find everyone.
I feel like there's also like a little bit of a thread between this and May December in some of the satirizing of like ridiculous people through how you write them.
That's nice. Yeah, thank you.
I will tell you, I saw this at a screening. I'm in New York, and press was really eating up the NYU jokes and the downtown, you know, literati vibe. And I'm born and raised here, and it got some big laughs for me. Yeah, I really quite enjoyed that. And also all the styling of him and also the other characters, but the all white outfits and the apartment and everything. I mean, I feel like I've met so many of these people over the years who are like, I'm a poet. And then you're like, why is your loft like 6 bedrooms? Like, what are you talking about? So yeah, that really brought it to life. And, you know, it was interesting speaking to Rudi a bit about this as someone who hasn't read the novella. He sort of made an insinuation that the movie is funny in a way the book is. And I was like, no. It's just modern humor. It's making the same jokes that I'm sure sort of like crushed in, you know, 1895 Vienna, but it's making it crush in the New York press screening because we get it for now. And so I assume that was a very fun project to figure out how to take that sort of satirizing that group and the humor and make it modern.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that really was, I mean, that's really how I always, that's the appeal, I think, is, you know, Ed is really bringing with him something very moving to me. That's also uncomfortable at times and can be funny, I think. But then, yeah, it's these sort of really high on their own supply, I guess you would say. I don't actually know where that phrase comes from. These kids that, you know, I don't think they're a representation. That would be my fear, is that anyone would walk away thinking that's what I think of Gen Z or something.
No.
Like, this is rarefied, very specific people.
Gen Z is not reading and talking about things. And
well, but I like the idea that you're kind of able to satirize modern culture and in TikTok and you know, influencers, while also satirizing the people who feel holier than thou about influencers and TikTok, and yet still glued to their phones when they need to text their girlfriends across the way, you know, across the bar.
The hypocrisy of always,
definitely.
Yeah, definitely. That's always fun. I mean, I love that the screenings that I've seen, when he goes to Meyer's apartment, like, just no one says anything, he just opens the door and that gets a laugh, and that's like very funny to me.
Yeah. Sammy, I do want to ask really quickly, to switch gears slightly. I know you have another adaptation coming out that has been a long journey. So for listeners who don't know, Sammy wrote Coyote vs. Acme, which has had a perilous journey to the screen. It is both an adaptation of Looney Tunes and an adaptation of a New Yorker article, and the film was infamously almost deleted by Warner Brothers until Ketchup Entertainment came in and saved it and is releasing it. What, if anything, did you learn from that experience?
Oh, well, I did learn a lot, but it's really an interesting difference especially because the article, the humor piece by Ian Fraser, is so funny. That's written in 1991. I think there have been many times where they've tried to set this film up, and it's, you know, he's obviously, it's so funny, but it's there's not a plot there. It's a tone, so that was certainly on the wall of trying to honor it. And then these characters are, I mean, Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner first appeared in, I think, 1949.
Wow.
So there was a real sense of getting, you know, handed, because that was I was hired, you know, as a job, and getting to hold some of these characters, and not just them, because there are some really funny, you know, Tweety Bird and Foghorn Leghorn actually, I think, has a great role. I mean, when Dave and I, the director, were talking from the beginning of like where to place all these characters, it was always thinking of them as like a theater troupe of like, okay, who can we put here? Who makes sense as a senator? You know, Elmer Fudd, you know, who's like that kind of thing. And who can kind of play against type or certain things. So it was really an honor to get to write those characters for, you know, the time that I did, because I'm sure that candle's going to be passed for a lot longer than everyone.
And I assume more of a straight comedy than your previous two films that you've written.
Yes, but because it like, I like to think of it as, you know, Roger Rabbit is to film noir.
I was going to say, is this Roger Rabbit like updated in some ways?
Like it's a legal thriller for kids. You know, I mean, there's a court, you know, there's a conspiracy. So it's like, there are elements that I think some of the funniest scenes are some of the most serious scenes, because we're kind of playing it straight. And there are moments where you can, I think, get sucked into that and feel the emotion and then go, oh, wait, this is extremely silly. And there's like, you know, pianos falling from the sky. And that's most of it. It is, of course, you know, comedy and for a different audience. But it was a really wild. It was wild to get hired. I mean, I got hired off the spec of May, December. That was not what I was expecting to be my first studio job, you know?
And then to go through the process you had to go through.
Yeah, it was like a 2.5 year writing. And that all took place. I mean, there were drafts already of Coyote vs. Acme before I ever even read Late Fame.
Oh.
And now that they're coming out in the same month is very strange.
Well, I'm excited to see it.
Yeah.
Finally.
I've
been waiting like a year to see it.
I know. I really hope people see it and like and bring kids. Like I really think it's a really fun, and Dave Green did a great job, and I'm just happy for everyone that it's out in the world. It's a happy ending.
And my non sequitur question that I couldn't resist asking is about, it seems like you were very involved with casting the Hunger Games adaptations.
No. Well, I was.
Your IMDb says it. What's the truth?
Okay, the truth is that casting is a pyramid. Okay, so the casting director of the Hunger Games is Debbie Zane in LA. So all the main character, the top, any celebrity. But when movies, my mom was a casting director in North Carolina and Georgia at that time, before she was in LA before that. But so I was her assistant after college. So I'd fly down to North Carolina. So I was the local casting assistant in North Carolina.
Cool.
But I want to say, I did do all four. Those movies, they bring in all these huge celebrities, but then there are 70 more parts to cast. So I will take involved, because those are extremely very, very big productions. A lot of people, thousands and thousands of actors go on tape and stuff. And they were so fun, and I loved. Those were some of the funnest. Yeah.
Honestly, one of my questions was going to be like, what on earth was it like dealing with the backlash of casting that movie? So maybe it's like you got to avoid. It's like, let's just go do some like random District 12 people. We don't need to be part of this.
And some of the characters are certainly ones you would know. And also, what was so fun with the first one was that the hype was so extreme that they were announcing every single character. So there were, like, in Entertainment Weekly, it would be like the boy from District 7 or whatever. And it would be like this sweet 14-year-old boy from Durham or whatever, who's like Headshot is now, that was so exciting. Like when people really want to be in the thing, that was so fun. Yeah.
Now, Sammy, we have one more question that we like to ask our guests, since this is an adaptation podcast, and you're actually in a unique position because you write these things.
Yeah.
Is there a book that has not been adapted that you'd love to see get adapted for the screen at some point?
That's a really interesting question. That's really interesting. I mean, there are some. I know some I'm like, should I not mention? Because
you might want to do it.
That's true. I think I can think of one that's not in that category.
Or this is maybe the low key way for you to start campaigning for getting.
Yeah, that's true. Let's manifest.
Well, so there's, you know what? One I'll say, because I love this book, and I would do it, but it's challenging.
Okay.
I think it maybe has been adapted in other countries, but Patricia Highsmith's Edith's Diary is one of my favorite books. It's extremely dark, and again, it's very interior.
Okay.
So that would be very hard. It's sort of about a woman who's has this really
this sounds good.
dark life with her son, is very dysfunctional, but then you're going back and forth between how she's writing about it in her diary, which is very rosy colored glasses, and you're kind of like, why is there this disconnect exactly? That's my memory of it as well. But that's a great book, and if someone could do that,
wow, I can't wait to see your adaptation of it.
Yeah, I feel like if you do it, you'd also you'd find a way to make it funny, and also dark.
Yeah,
Sammy,
I mean, it's definitely funny as well.
Sammy, thank you so much for taking out the time to chat. Everybody go see Late Fame, go see Coyote versus Acme.
Be an interesting double feature.
Yeah. I mean,
it's the new Barbenheimer.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the Burchenheimer. Sammy, thank you so much again for being here, and we really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you guys for having me. This was really fun and really nice to meet both of you.
It Was a Book First is hosted and produced by Sophie Burch and Rudi Greenberg. Music written by Cliff Blum and John Connolly, produced by Kevin Potts. Logo by Trisha Louise Prieto. Website by Kevin Fobb. Follow us on Instagram at It Was a Book First Pod, and we'll see you next week.